barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. Again, barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. I'll say barefaced lies. Again.
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you want where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shooting cold, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced lies.
Barefaced lies. Barefaced lies.
Hey Sean, you got a party, got that little party going on there. Keep to the left, you can't think right, so everything you do goes wrong, yeah. Incompetence just leads to disaster. Corruption brings it on even faster. What you say?
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you wonder where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shit cold, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced. That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you wonder where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shit cold, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced lies.
Barefaced lies. Barefaced lies.
Comrades, you always told us you'd build us all a new Jerusalem, yeah. You talk the talk, but when you walk, you only leave a crooked line there. And you don't see the trouble that's brewing if all you do is just what you're doing.
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you wonder where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shit cold, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced lies.
Is this where you wanna be? Dancing childhood poverty. Oh, somebody set us free from this corrupt kleptocracy. Oh yeah.
Barefaced lies.
That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you wonder where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shit cold, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced. That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you wonder where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shit cold, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced. That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you wonder where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise, you get shit cold, overgrown, postal phone, barefaced. That's right, yeah, we got an agenda. And it's your money we're gonna spend, yeah. Do you wonder where it's all gonna end, yeah? Do you think we ever wanna defend, yeah? Cause when the truth becomes so easy to disguise.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011, he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
A very, very good evening, it's like part 2. A very good evening, it's Raja Miah, Reticent 9 transmission. It is Monday night. It's gone very, very strange. I feel like I've got a job. I'm doing this and turning it on all the time now. So, wow. What can I say? Oh. I had a very, very dear friend. Thank you, Sean. I had a very, very dear friend who passed last year. About this time last year, he started to get ill. His name was Warren Bates. Absolute legend. Absolute legend. And what Warren would do every now and then, I'd ask, "Oi, mate, if you're getting divorced, keep me out of it, okay?" And what Warren would do is I'd ask him how he was, because he was an intense character and he was old. Not old, but he was 86, but he behaved like a 30-year-old. He had more energy than most 30-year-olds I knew. He'd phone me up at 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning, wanting to give me the latest news, and he'd have a regime of what he'd get up to in his day. I fell out with him once because he woke me up at like 6 in the morning on a Saturday morning. And I snapped, and I shouldn't have. I'm like, "Warren, do you have any idea what time it is? It's 6 in the morning or something." And he was like, "Well, I'm up." And that was Warren. Now, one of Warren's phrases when you asked him how he was, "He feels wonderful." He'd say, "I feel wonderful." And his eyes would be lit up, and he'd say, "I feel wonderful." And that's exactly how I'm feeling this evening. I feel wonderful. And the reason why I feel wonderful, and you need to leave the lad alone. He's here somewhere, I think. I saw him come up. I saw his name come up. Let me bring him up. Says me looking for him. I'm sure I saw him. I'm sure I didn't imagine him, Derek. I'm sure I didn't imagine him. Here he is. He's doing amazing work. Come on, people. He's doing amazing work. And it doesn't matter. He's a young man. My career's done. I'm at a different stage in my life. I'm happy to sit on a park bench with a flask of tea and a cheese sandwich. You know, look at him, he's always smart, looking the part, and really hammering it to him. He doesn't run GB News, he just works for him. So, leave him alone. And the reason why I'm feeling wonderful is GB News broke a story today. For some reason, it's behind one of their paywalls, so you might have to pay £5 for now, or I'll go through the story tomorrow, is my plan, in detail. But it's absolutely amazing. In Rotherham, they've gone and found a police officer, retired now or left, who's given them an interview in multi-parts, and I've read the first part, validating pretty much everything I've said of how the mosques were used by the Labour Party to protect the grooming gangs. And the police were in on it. Do you know how that makes me feel? After 6 years. And I come from it from a slightly different place, I think, if I'm honest with you. My beginnings is, I come from it from a place of I want to help clean the mosques up. They should have nothing to do with any of this. They should be doing good in the community, not covering up for gang rapists. And they should stay out of party politics, not deliver sackfuls of postal votes. So my journey here was from a different place. But do you know how I feel? That this has now come out? It's not even that. It's like I've had a weight on me that I didn't know I was carrying. So I will go through that tomorrow. And hopefully Charlie and the boys will maybe feature it on GB News rather than just have it as a story behind a paywall. I'm sure they know what they're doing. What do I know? I've got a light here and a camera here and a mic that every now and then I do that too to see if it works. So, if you are finding value in my work, and someone asked me if my subscriptions has gone up, I think it was Julie, who cares for me in the way her father used to care for me. They've gone up by 6. So, I'm not sure what to say to that, Julie, other than smile. Because we're still in this fight and we're still winning. So, if you are one of the 279 I'm looking on my screen, most of you, well, you could start off by liking the stream perhaps. And then if you are of a mind to do so, buy me a coffee. £3. You can spend £1 actually if you want using PayPal, but £3. Or better still, subscribe to Red Wall and the Rabble, completely free. You only pay if you want to pay, but you can subscribe completely free. I took a decision on the 1st of January, and remember we'd come to a point where we got battered at the elections, and it looked like we were out, down and out. I was completely out of savings, to the point where one of you got in touch with me because my web page was down. My web page was down because I didn't have the £250 to get it back up. Someone then gave me the £250 to get it back up. So that's how out of money I was. And the 6 years had killed me. I mean, I still look at these interviews and I look at myself and I look knackered compared to how I was. But it's okay. It's okay. So please, if you can, at the very least, subscribe to the bloody newsletter. And then when we go into the fight and people look to see who he is and what he brings, at least on paper, I've got 10,000 behind me. That's what I'd like. I'd like 10,000 of you behind me. At the very least. And I wasn't I, mate? I was having to work in a cafe as well, just so I could keep the heating on over winter. And I don't share any of this with any of you, but my close friends knew what I was doing and what I was having to do. So, if only, Louise, if only. I'd want someone I would want someone like, what was the professor called? The Doc, out of Back to the Future. I'd want someone like that to play Warren. The letter is just published. You don't even have to subscribe, Judith. The letter is just on Redwall and the Rabble. It's on one of the articles. As to subscribing to my newsletter, you subscribe to my newsletter using this link. Well, it's not a link, but that. Yeah, Doc Brown. No, you help me enough. You help enough. If everyone just paid £1, I'd be quids in. If everyone just paid £1, I'd be. I might get my motorbike MOT'd if everyone just paid £1. Right. I am indeed thinking positive. You can see I'm feeling wonderful. Seriousness. So I've been doing quite a few of these interviews, and you know the place I come to it from. One, I belong to that community, even though many people in that community ostracized me. And I feel I have a responsibility to the good people from that community to fight for them and demonstrate to the wider community that we all want better for our children and each other's children. And we won't tolerate any of this. It's been hard. And then I've engaged with people who are, well, first of all, everyone I've known from my past life who are politically of the left or in decent jobs, so too scared to. I've seen next to none of them for the last 6 years, as they've all either distanced themselves from me willingly or through fear and anxiety for their own jobs and their own families. Completely understandable. I hold none of that against them. And then the people who came into my world were a combination of many people like you, the elderly here. No offence. But who remembered the place they called home in a different way and were desperate to fight for it and needed someone who could speak on behalf of them. Then there are a whole host of people who were survivors and their families, of those who had been treated unfairly, unjustly by the cartels that run my town, the criminals. And anyone following Tameside politics lately, you must be laughing. I know my friend Liam Billington's laughing. You wanted to be done with the corruption. There was the anti-Labour Party brigade. Remember when I started this, I was a Labour Party member, so that wasn't me. Naively, I thought I could help clean up the Labour Party from the inside. Those of you who believe in democracy, who are fed up of being called far-right and racists. And let's be honest, some of you who did have a series of prejudices as a consequences of your life experiences. I don't think anyone's born a racist, and I don't think anyone needs to stay a racist or far-right or an extremist. I worked in counter-extremism work, for crying out loud. We believed we could engage with people who were on the fringes of violence and help turn them around. Thank you. And then there were those who were just apathetic. It's like you said, Lynn, they're just apathetic. Who just wanted to whinge and moan. And were happy to support me whilst I raised complaints, but were nowhere to be seen when I came up with the solutions as to how they could be the difference they wanted to see. Now I've dealt with all of that, and it's been fine. But increasingly, and there is a but it's not a burden I carry heavily at all. Increasingly, what is becoming more and more apparent to me is there is a growing narrative in this country. And the failings on me and people from my community, I'm very clear where the failings are. There's an increasingly anti-Muslim narrative, anti-Islam narrative, and this growing perception that one is not compatible with the other, as in with the West and with living here. And of course I struggle with that because I'm quite comfortable living here and I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. But I feel it too. I feel it too. I worry about it. I look at the changing demographics of towns like mine, the increasing number of Muslims, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, as a consequence of the way in which the demographics of these communities have developed and the numbers have grown. I look to see where my people have integrated and where they haven't. And I also very clearly see how they are more politically alienated than their parents or grandparents ever were. And I worry, where will it end? I picked my tea up just earlier. I went to the Spice of Life round the corner from my place. My friend Faz, known him for 20 years, went to his wedding. I picked his baby up when he had his first child, now 15 or 16 I think. And I had half a conversation with him, and he wouldn't finish the conversation because he was too embarrassed to. And his embarrassment was the amount of pressure he's been put on and people like him who remain my friends from that community, because there are so many with such separatist, sectarian views who want people like me gone, one way or another. So whatever weight I carry, the consequences on people who've stood by me, particularly from that community, are 100 times worse. And by the way, my keema rice and chicken tikka starter was spectacular. So, I'm going to these various podcasts and I'm doing as many of them as possible. Don't for 1 minute think I don't research the people I go and speak to. Of course I do. And the politics, which is why I put up the Lotus Eaters thing. It's clever, isn't it? The definition. I think it was Ulysses, not Hercules. I think it was Ulysses. In my Greek mythology is what it once was. So, let's play the 20 minutes. He's put the entire podcast is available. You can all watch it for free. I don't want to play with his algorithms. You can watch it for free, but you've got to sign up to their page. It's like an insight, it's like a thing that they have that hopefully then you'll become a paid member. That's their gig. It's not my gig. It's how they've done it. But I welcomed the opportunity to speak to them because I knew I was engaging with an audience which was as far on the right as I've possibly spoken with, as in intellectually. I gave an interview to a young man who was up in Rochdale and it was okay. But he just didn't, he was 21 years old. And when you're 21, you think you know everything and the reality is. But Dan isn't like that. And the Lotus Eaters team aren't like that. Let me play it. I'm going to watch it as well with you. And I would very much like, I'll share some of my thoughts. It's only 20 minutes. And I'd like an honest and frank Q&A with as many of you as possible. Of where it's going. Where this is going. And my hope is, over the next couple of weeks, let it get a little bit lighter. Early March, I'll host an in-person meeting where those of you who can turn up and we'll have that chat. And if not, I'll host some Zoom sessions where I'd like to see your faces and we talk to each other. Because we all need to find some common ground to get to where we need to get to. Otherwise, divided, we've got no chance. They'll destroy us. I've never been in a court until... I'm sorry, mate. I'm sorry, mate. Is that what it's from? Is it a poem, Tony? I got the phrase from the Greek mythology bit. Maybe I've made it up. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you so much. They are brave because the amount of pressure they've had on. So, let's find this interview. Oh, he's a very stylish man. I think he used to be a venture capitalist or something, he told me. So he plays his role very well. Says Raja with his camera not working now. Hold on. Video source. Oh, why is it doing that? Give me a second. You'll have to wait with me whilst I unplug some wires at the back. Oh, that's why. It's my own fault. I'd unplugged something. Perfect. Let's watch this together.
Welcome to Brokenomics. Now, in this episode, it's going to be a bit of a dark and grim subject matter, I'm afraid. We're going to take a look at the grooming gangs, and I thought, well, who do I know about that? Raja Miah.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for coming on. So you've made a bit of a name for yourself as a campaigner, primarily on this issue of what's been happening to the white working class and the grooming gang victims. So I've got to start with this. You know, you're a Muslim lad of Bangladeshi origins, and why does the plight of the white working class and the children bother you when? I suppose we come back to this point. It clearly doesn't bother the Labour Party, who are supposed to be the representatives of the white working class.
It's a fair question. I am. I mean, where do I start? I am a trained anti-racist, and what is taking place here is textbook racism. So, if I believe in anti-racist work, and I spent 20 years advocating anti-racist strategies, strengthening communities, then surely I have a responsibility to look at this as a clear example of racism. These are racially motivated crimes. And I had to speak out, first and foremost. Secondly, the children. I spent 20 years safeguarding children, and I have a career for at least that amount of time as well in protecting communities from extremism. I helped shape a lot of the government's thinking on how to fight against Al-Qaeda, is what, essentially. So I look at this and all of those issues overlap. But in the end, this is my home. These are my communities. These children could have been my children. And no one was helping them. No one was speaking out on behalf of them. And those who were didn't have the skill set to navigate the traps that were set for them by the establishment, which then made it easy for people to be demonized.
Yeah.
And I can play that game for a whole host of reasons. And one, I'm obviously brown-faced Muslim, like you said, but that's not stopped these idiots from calling me far right and racist. But we now all know, don't we, Dan? What does that term even mean?
Yes,
yeah.
we're all far right now.
Yeah. So
yes.
So you can
does it at least give you a bit of cover? Because I mean, there have been people who have spoken out about this sort of stuff, and they tend to get shut down by the state.
No, it makes
very
it worse
fast.
for me. It makes it worse for me because the flip side is I have got to navigate the communities where I come from, and being demonized as far right and racist.
This is a northern town.
It's a northern town, northern working class town, a small Bangladeshi community. My mother died nearly 18 months ago now, and towards the back end of her life, she was struggling with all of this, what was going on, because she's got a network of friends, extended family who wanted to know why her son was wanting to help white people. And the pressures that came with that, and why can't he stay quiet? It's got nothing to do with us. It's not our kids it's happening to.
Yeah, well, that is something that concerns me. So two things on this. I mean, first, Carl always makes the point that I think for most of us, if we rang up 12 friends and said, "Look, I've got this, young girl tied up upstairs. Do you want to come around and help rape her?" I don't know how many people there are that would actually have 12 friends who would respond to that.
Well, I'd respond to that. I'd come and smack.
Exactly. I think if I rang 12 of my friends, within the first phone call, they would have reported me to the police.
Yes.
But for some reason, in the Muslim community, it seems like they can just ring up 12 of their friends, and not only do they not get reported, but they all sort of go along with it. So it feels like the Muslim community has failed the test of friendship. And as you've just talked about, there is that sort of omerta of silence that's sort of in there as well. And, you can understand why people immediately sort of leap to, well, deportations are the only thing that are going to solve this. I mean, what's your thoughts on this? Why is this community so comfortable with these crimes?
It's a question. One, I agree they are. I think that's the first thing we've got to start with. I agree they are, and I think they are comfortable with these crimes because these crimes have been going on for such a long time, in plain sight, without any repercussions. So to answer your question as to why they're comfortable because those who are responsible can get away with it. The second reason why they're comfortable is because those who are involved in trying to safeguard them or attempting to safeguard them are also comfortable with these children being used the way they are. And it's only until very recently that we agree that it was always absurd to say that it was a lifestyle choice of an 11-year-old or a 12-year-old to be gang raped.
Yeah.
Or
in some cases even younger than that.
Yeah, even some cases indeed even younger than that. So it was normalized as though acceptable, just one of those things that go on in society. And after all, these are girls that were damaged, and I'm not of that opinion. I'm sharing the perception. These are damaged children who brought it on themselves. They're in care homes, or the parents don't look after them. So if no one's caring for them, who cares?
Well, that was certainly the view of the police.
Yes, that was the view of the police.
Yes.
So you've got the view of the community, you've got the view of those who are meant to safeguard them, and you've got the view of those who are meant to protect them in terms of the police. And then you have the view of the politicians in the wider context who are meant to, speak out on behalf and address some of these issues. And they looked at the situation and they thought they can benefit from it. So that's why it was normalized. There was not just one failing in one community. There was at least 4 different areas where those failings took place, and all are responsible and all are complicit.
So we must drill down into each of those. But before we get into that, let's talk briefly about the actual scale of the problem. How big actually is this problem?
When I was first told about this, probably at the time of the Rochdale grooming gang, I'd just done a piece of work in Manchester and Rochdale around some of the counter-terrorism strategy, and the EDL were coming up to protest in Rochdale. around 2012, I reckon it was 2011, 2012. I'll be honest with you, Dan, I didn't believe it. I didn't believe that in 21st century United Kingdom, children were being groomed, gang raped, and trafficked across the country in the way that was being presented as what had taken place. And I've gone away and looked at it. I've looked at the evidence. Kemi Badenoch stood up in Parliament, and I'll paraphrase her, but she talked about the systemic grooming and gang rape of children across the nation. And she addressed Keir Starmer in the lead up to the vote, what they rejected, which was a vote for a national inquiry into what had taken place. So I would say to you, this is systemic across the entire country. This is systemic, particularly in communities where there is a significant Pakistani, Bangladeshi Muslim community living, close with white working class communities. And I'd say in every one of those towns and cities, you will find this problem. These networks of men that I've then gone and looked at didn't operate in silos, in council areas. They ran cross-county trafficking of children in a similar way to how heroin is transported. And in many instances, many of these men that were involved, are also the exact men who are involved in the heroin trade.
Right.
Yes, and children are
exclusive. So why not overlap?
Yeah, and children, you can sell heroin once, Dan. You can, as we found out from the harrowing cases, you can sell children 40, 50 times a night, and sometimes to 4 or 5 men at once.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the EDL. I seem to remember that the BNP were the other ones
that
spoke
BNP,
about this. And I believe, what's it named? Nick Griffin.
Nick Griffin even spoke about this.
Well, I understand he actually went to jail for things that we now know to be true.
Nick Griffin.
Yeah.
I look at this, and I've been on my own journey with this as well. And I say, okay, there's framing does it really exist? Which is one. The reasons why and the solutions. So I look at this, and also who's responsible. And how I've been trying to navigate this is try and make sure that we accept that there are failings within the communities where I come from. But the communities where I come from, there are also people like me who want this dealt with. And we have been ostracized and sidelined by the very authorities that are involved in having failed these children and look the other way. This isn't just you can look at it in the lens of a racial lens or a religious lens. Fine, I accept there's arguments for that. I take it further. I say there's also very serious failings in our institutions who are meant to protect these children.
Certainly.
And also in our political class, what took place is that they benefited from the arrangement. I take it to a darker place where I say, and it's based on my experiences and my interactions and my understanding of this issue. I've given the last 6 years of my life to essentially to fighting for this. And before that, I've got 20 years of working at a senior enough level to understand how all of this plays out. And I'm very clear on this. Children, white working class children, were exchanged for votes.
Yes. Yes, I think that is exactly what happened. And you made a number of points there that I want to circle back on. But essentially, you're saying that the problem is so large we don't know how large it is.
If you were to ask me, I would bet my last penny that we are talking at least 100,000 children.
100,000 children?
At least.
Minimum?
At least.
Okay. One of the other things you mentioned there was, and I do definitely want to build up to the failings of the police and local authorities and the Labour Party and so on. But one of the things you mentioned there was ostracism within the community. So, I mean, what's it like coming from this community and speaking out about it? I mean, is it accepted that, that something has to be done, or do you get shut up, don't talk about it, all that kind of stuff?
There was a police officer at my house yesterday, and that police officer had come round because I had been repeatedly reporting clear crimes by a network of Islamists who have been inciting my murder for the last 4 years at least. The police have refused to arrest a single one of these because of their political connections. But as recently as yesterday, there was a police officer in my house, And what these guys have been doing non-stop is they use their interpretations of Quranic scripture, their viewpoints in Sharia law, to try and essentially put a fatwa on me, a religious doctrine to take me out. And what they're arguing around, or what the case they're presenting, is that I am a gay Christian convert. So for them, being gay from my background means you can kill him, and being a Christian convert means you can not just kill him, but burn him.
Pretty high up there on the get you killed list. Yeah.
And this stuff is regularly published and shared online with my photograph, my publishing my home address, everything. And these men are protected. The most recent case was shared on a WhatsApp group that these men have, and translated, the word is bisar in it. Now, bisar translated is community judgment according to Sharia law. And that's what the word means. Right. And they'd generated an AI video of me involved in some homosexual act, and happily distributed to thousands.
That's not good.
Yeah, right. With the view of trying to incite my murder.
Yes,
there's no ambiguity. So when you ask me, that is what I'm dealing with.
I mean, you say their interpretations, but I mean, have they not got a point? Because a lot of people will say, well, the Prophet Muhammad took a 9-year-old bride, and therefore you could say that maybe they're not completely out of line on this stuff. And to be fair, that he did also take a dim view of people who committed apostasy and all that sort of thing. So I mean, it's a fairly lively career that the chap had.
And I look at that, and I'm not a religious expert at all. All I can share with you is that the Islam I was raised in, the mosque that I went to, and a generation of people like me, from I think Islam and the way in which Islam is experienced in the United Kingdom now is very different to how it was 30 years ago or 40 years ago.
Yes.
No, when I
even Islam in Egypt in the 1950s is very, very different. Well, Iran, all of them.
Yeah.
Islam appears to have been moving significantly more radical over the course of the latter half of the last century.
Agreed. And I struggle with that. And I always saw it as a spiritual thing. The people I went to the mosque with, in the main, were nice people who did nice things in the community, and it was a spiritual thing. It was no different than friends of mine going to church on a Sunday. That's the Islam I grew up with. It wasn't this political experience that it is now. It wasn't this angry phenomenon that it is now. And it definitely wasn't one where practicing it puts you at odds with the nation that should be your home.
If you would like to see the full version of this premium video, please head over to lotuseaters.com and subscribe to gain full access to all of our premium content.
Sorry, of course, no sound. No sound was because I was eating a Twix whilst that we were watching that together, and I thought you wouldn't want to hear me munching away on it. So that's what went on. I go to those places, and these are decent people. And they've got to a position where they clearly see, increasingly, that it is not possible for Islam to coexist with the West. And I appreciate and understand their viewpoint, but yet, my determination in this from the outset to now has always been, we have to find a way. We have to find our way of how those of us who want to live together can live together. Because if that is not the place we end up in, where do we end up? One extreme, you have the road that the Prime Minister Keir Starmer is taking us down, an authoritarian environment where our freedoms are taken away from us. Should we dare speak out against any element of the multicultural utopia? Would Royal Marines put in prison and remanded? Using fast-track decisions as to something I'd see in some banana republic in South America. And on the other extreme, you see a world where the term remigration or re-immigration, whatever it is, actually means rounding up everyone who looks like me and sending them somewhere else. And neither of those options are viable for me. So what is it we want? And I say to my Muslim friends, in particular on this, if we don't change and become part of the solution, then I know where I think it will end up. Because I think the days for Keir Starmer and his brand of politics in the Labour Party are numbered. And what will come next will be what we're seeing in other parts of Europe, such as Italy. We are no different. We are no better. Now, I'm very clear. On the 6 years of work I've done, the majority of my allies have been from the white working classes who want to find a way of living together. And even those with racist views or prejudices, they want not to be like that in the main. And I call some of these people friends because we've been on a journey together, and I'm happy to call them friends. But from the Muslim communities in the United Kingdom, the Pakistanis, the Bangladeshis, however else you want to describe them in terms of the ethnicity, there are those who are too scared, and I think that's the vast majority, to say anything. And I say to them, if you're too scared to say anything now, your opportunity to say anything will never come again. And then you'll have genuinely something to fear. There are those, the cartels, who profit from it. And there are those who genuinely want this fight. The Islamists, they genuinely want the fight. And the strategy they've now got is to use democracy as a weapon. And the problem we've got, as GB News demonstrated very much today, is that whilst they are using democracy as a weapon, the very politicians that they're blackmailing and the police that they're blackmailing have their hands tied behind their back, so the very institutions that are meant to protect and safeguard us are being used against us. How on earth can a Rotherham police officer How on earth can a Rotherham police officer come out and say what he did? About how the grooming gangs were protected and the link between the mosques and the politicians and the police. Now, I have my own views on how to fix some of this. And yes, the block vote is one of them because it's controlled by the criminals and it's controlled by the Islamists. And postal votes is central to this. And then I look at the other political parties. Forget Labour. They're rotten. Forget them. There's no change going to come from them. And someone put it up earlier about Muslims voting for reform. I agree with you. Muslims should vote for reform. They should vote for the Conservatives. But we need to move beyond the space of identity politics. We actually need to look at policies. Policies that will benefit all of us. And I end up in the same place I increasingly find myself ending up in. Who looks like they're most likely to be able to facilitate these conversations and actually move the debate forward in the places where decisions are made? We know it's not the Labour Party. I saw the interview with Kemi Badenoch on, is it trigonometry, a couple of days ago. It's like a thin paper, it's like a veneer, shallow. There's no depth to her. I'm sorry, my Conservative friends, there's no depth to her. You've elected the wrong bloody person. And I look at reform, and I think they're still very young and all over the place. It's not a criticism, it's because they're very young. They're all over the place. And there's not enough of them. So it's down to us. It's down to each and every one of us to educate ourselves and flip it around so we're informing the decision makers. Because these people either don't want to, or are unable to, or not yet ready to be the change we want to see. Why did the grooming gang vote take place in January? Not one politician was responsible for what took place. It was a community campaign that went back at least 6 years with various individuals from a whole host of specialist areas, many of whom had never met each other. But we all agreed on one fundamental: our children should be safe. And no, you do have a voice without being called far right. And so what if you're called far right? We need to stop looking for reasons why we can't be the change and identify the ways in how we can be the change. And the way we're doing that, well, we are, is on Wednesday we forced a vote. Oh, it's forced a vote, what difference does that make? Well, we'll know on Wednesday whether this town rejects the toothless inquiry or whether the politicians in charge of this town are complicit in the cover-up once and for all, because we've cornered them. So that's where we're at. And it's entirely up to you where this goes. Over the next, because there's no elections anytime soon, over the next 9 months or so, I'm going to start again at the beginning of the journey I took a small group of people on here, on how to effectively lobby and inform politics at a local level, how to navigate the media, and how to be the difference you want to see in the towns and communities where you live in. How to navigate the far right trap, and how to speak on these issues so you can get to where you need to get to. And Tracy, I know Toby Young. I think he's reinvented himself really well. And I think the Free Speech Union do a lot of good work. But joining them isn't going to help you if you're not speaking out. I've tried reaching out to them, mate. I think they have a different angle on this. You and I are both blocked from Reform Oldham, Tracy. I think they have got a journey to go on themselves. And I think it'd be the same in towns and cities across the country. When you start from scratch, you sometimes start in the wrong place with the wrong people. That's not my issue right now. My issue is getting this public inquiry over the line. And my concern is that the cover-up of the gang rape of children is a symptom of an underlying disease. I called it a cancer, and my friend Lee Cook got in touch with me and told me off for calling it a cancer. I'll call it a disease. And that is at the heart of our democracy. And if you go beyond that, it's actually at the heart of our society. Our multicultural model has not worked. We need to stop lying to ourselves. It doesn't mean that we deport everyone. It means it's not worked. And we need to find a way of it working for the people who call this place home and want to live here and abide by the rules here. It's as simple as that. But today, it doesn't work like that. How many councils we need to call a public inquiry for? Each council that writes to the government is another council that tells the government, we're not standing for this. 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100. You can feel it. I'm sure you can feel it, Patricia. The media bandwagon in the main has moved on. And this issue will die a death unless we force it. Which is what we're trying to do on Wednesday. This is the thing, Joanna. It wasn't always like this, was it? It wasn't always like this. Now I'm clear. As a strategist, I'm clear. I look at 2029. I'm looking at the next general election, building up our numbers, building up our campaign, building up those of us who have been trained and understand this world in the way I talk about it and can navigate it, to challenge those in power leverage power, and deliver the change they want to see. I'm a campaigner. That's what I do. We did it with 200 people in this town. I want to do it now with 20,000 across the country. But between now and the end of March, we're going to focus on this issue, and I'm just going to talk about all the things we've talked about. But our numbers need to grow. Because if our numbers aren't of a sufficient level, we're not going to get anywhere. So please, I'll come back tomorrow. I'll do the GB news story. I feel wonderful. And please, Charlie, I'm not sure why you're not, but get it on the news as to what this police officer, his testimony from Rotherham. The nation needs to know, the world needs to know. In fact, on X I saw it as a world exclusive. Well, if it's a world exclusive, you need to put it out so the world knows. Please, if you can, please leverage whatever power, influence you have there. If you find value to the 916 today, so it's a quieter session, which is fine. Please like, please subscribe, it costs you nothing, and for the love of God, please sign up to the newsletter. Thank you, Louise. We can win this, Gary. We can win this across the country. No doubt in my mind whatsoever. No doubt in my mind whatsoever. I'm looking at the members. I'll leave it to you to decide why it is that some of you, most of you, are not signing up. Good night.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them. On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011 he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know. Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.